The Nature of Reality by Bandra. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken, a podcast where science, philosophy, psychology, mysticism, and direct experience come together to explore life's deepest questions. What is reality? Who are you beyond your thoughts, beliefs, and stories? Is consciousness merely a product of the brain, or is it the very foundation of existence itself? Join us as we journey beyond assumptions, challenge conventional thinking, and investigate the mysteries that have fascinated humanity for thousands of years. This is more than a conversation. It is an invitation to awaken to a deeper understanding of yourself, the universe, and the extraordinary reality we all share. Welcome to Conversations That Awaken.
Imagine for a second that you're looking at a standard political map of the world.
Right, the kind you'd see in a high school classroom.
Exactly. So you see this stark, solid pink line separating the United States from Canada, and maybe a bright yellow block for India right next to an orange Pakistan.
And those lines, they feel totally permanent, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. They dictate economies, laws, identities, everything. But if you were to, zoom out into space, orbit the Earth, and just look down, something deeply humbling happens.
Which is?
That pink line doesn't exist. I mean, the Earth itself has absolutely no concept of where one nation ends and another begins.
Yeah, nature doesn't care about our borders.
Right. A river doesn't stop to show its passport. Birds migrate thousands of miles across those lines without ever applying for a visa. So the divisions we literally fight and bleed and die over, they exist entirely in the human mind.
It's all conceptual.
Exactly. And today we are exploring a terrifying but ultimately liberating question. What if we've done the exact same thing to God?
Oh, wow. I mean, that is the kind of question that doesn't just challenge a specific belief. It quietly dismantles the entire framework of how you perceive reality.
Yeah, we're not just tweaking a theological detail here today. We are pulling the foundational cornerstone right out from under an entire architecture of human thought.
Because when you question the map you've been handed, I mean, everything resting on that map, your definitions of life, death, morality, heaven, hell, salvation, it's suddenly all up for review.
Right. Because for thousands of years, billions of people have built their entire reality on a very specific image of, a cosmic king sitting somewhere beyond the universe, pulling all the levers.
And we just accept it as the absolute truth.
Yeah. So today we're going on a mission to deconstruct that architecture. We're going to examine how institutions have historically engineered obedience and ultimately explore what happens when you strip away every single label, every single constructed border to just encounter the raw, unfiltered territory of reality itself.
It's a huge undertaking.
It is. Our source text today was written by Bandra, a manuscript titled Drop the Map, Discover the Territory.
And right at the outset, I think it is crucial to establish our parameters for this exploration, because this is really sensitive terrain for a lot of people.
Oh, totally. We need to be clear about what this is and isn't.
Exactly. The goal here is absolutely not to attack religion or to mock anyone's faith. We're not endorsing anything or taking sides. The objective is not to violently tear down one set of beliefs, just to hand you a shiny new set of beliefs to blindly swallow.
Right, because if we do that, we've basically accomplished nothing except changing the wallpaper in the exact same psychological prison.
That's a great way to put it. The goal is rigorous, unflinching, critical thinking. I mean, knowledge is only truly valuable when it is deeply understood, not just memorized from a textbook or preached from a pulpit.
Yeah.
We're going to ask you to question the assumptions you inherited before you were even old enough to speak.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with that central metaphor of the entire text, the map versus the territory. We talked about the political map in the intro, but the leap the author makes here is just breathtaking.
It really is.
Humanity brushed up against the terrifying, awe-inspiring, absolutely unexplainable mystery of existence. And what did we do?
We panicked.
We did. Our immediate reflexive instinct was to draw borders around it. We named the infinite, we organized it, we institutionalized it. We literally drew territorial lines and said, hey, this is our God over here, and that is your God over there.
And our book is the accurate topographic map of the universe, and your book is a total counterfeit.
Yes, exactly.
Speaks volumes about the psychological comfort of maps, doesn't it? I mean, when human beings encounter the vast, terrifying unknown, our primary psychological defense mechanism is categorization.
We just have to put things in boxes.
We have to categorize to feel safe. It's an evolutionary imperative. If you are a hunter-gatherer and you hear a rustle in the bushes, your brain immediately needs to categorize it.
Is that just the wind, or is that a tiger that's going to eat me?
Precisely. And we do the exact same thing with existential dread. If the infinite remains infinite and undefined, it is completely unmanageable. It's totally overwhelming to the human nervous system.
Oh, for sure.
But if we can draw a border around God, if we can give the mystery a recognizable name, a set of strict behavioral rules, and, a physical building to reside in, we have effectively domesticated the infinite.
Wow. Domesticated the infinite.
We've made the terrifying unknown feel like a manageable roommate.
That makes so much sense when you think about it as a coping mechanism. It actually reminds me of how we map time.
Oh, interesting.
How so?
Well, the universe doesn't know what 2 p.m. is, the cosmos isn't wearing a wristwatch, and the sun certainly doesn't care about the concept of a Tuesday.
Tuesday's entirely made up.
Exactly. But we invented time zones. We invented daylight saving time to organize our crop harvests, our factory shifts, and now our afternoon Zoom meetings. It's this entirely constructed map that we just overlaid onto the rotation of a rock in space. And we completely forget that it's a map.
Yes. We get incredibly stressed out because we are, quote unquote, losing an hour of sleep in the spring, treating a human invention as if it's a rigid physical law of physics.
We take it so literally.
We really do. So I have to ask, is this instinct to map everything just a bug in human software, or is it a necessary tool that we just eventually take way too literally?
Oh, it is absolutely a necessary cognitive tool. I mean, we need conceptual maps to survive, to communicate, and to cooperate in massive numbers.
Right, like money.
Exactly. Without the conceptual map of money, modern society collapses overnight. Money is just a shared belief in a map. So the danger isn't in drawing the map. The danger is in forgetting that you were the one who drew it.
That's good.
The crisis occurs when you confuse the conceptual borders you constructed with absolute reality. That is the exact moment when a useful philosophy or a beautiful spiritual insight hardens into rigid dogma. You basically stop navigating the world and you start worshiping the compass.
Man, that's heavy. And I want you, listening right now, to really think about the maps you use every single day.
Yeah, we all have them.
Your political affiliations, your social labels, your career identities. Like, how often do you mistake those constructed imaginary borders for the absolute truth of who you are? It's profound.
It really forces you to step back.
And it provides the perfect segue because if we naturally draw maps just to feel safe and organized, it makes perfect sense that when it came time to imagine the ruler of the universe, we just modeled it after the only rulers we actually understood here on Earth.
Which brings us to the fascinating historical and sociological argument of the text. Let's think about the environment of ancient humanity during the agricultural revolution, because that's when these major religious maps were really being codified.
Right, they were living under pharaohs and warlords.
Pharaohs, emperors, tribal kings.
Yeah.
And what is the fundamental nature of an ancient earthly king? He sits on a physical throne. He demands absolute, unquestioning loyalty. He requires the collection of physical tribute and taxes. He conquers his geopolitical enemies. He severely punishes rebellion and generously rewards obedience.
And he has a whole system to back that up.
Exactly. He establishes strict legal codes and appoints a hierarchy of representatives, priests, tax collectors, guards, to enforce his will.
And then the text argues, we took that exact political structure and just copy-pasted it onto the cosmos.
We literally projected the brutal politics of Earth into the heavens.
We made the earthly ruler into a cosmic ruler. And the implications of that are staggering when you really think about it. Because suddenly, treason against the earthly king becomes heresy against the fabric of the universe itself.
Right, it elevates the crime.
Disobedience to a human authority figure magically transforms into disobedience to God.
It is the ultimate masterful consolidation of authority. There's a phrase in the text we really need to highlight here, which is power protects power.
Power protects power.
When an earthly institution, whether that be a council of elders, a monarchy, or a religious hierarchy, claims that they, and they alone, have exclusive access to ultimate truth, they're effectively turning spiritual authority into untouchable political power.
Because authority just justifies authority.
Exactly. Tradition sanctifies tradition. If the king says God personally appointed him, and the priests validate the king, you aren't just fighting a corrupt man with a standing army anymore.
You're fighting the divine order of reality itself.
To question the tax rate is to literally risk eternal damnation.
Okay, but I have to push back here a little bit, because calling this an intentional structural consolidation of power, it sounds incredibly cynical.
I get that. It does sound harsh.
Are we really saying a bunch of ancient humans sat in a smoky, firelit cave somewhere and consciously invented a cosmic king just to control the peasants? Because the reality is, these exact same religious traditions have built hospitals, they've fed the poor, inspired breathtaking architecture like the Sistine Chapel, and driven unimaginable moral courage in the face of tyranny.
Right, it's not all bad.
So how does the author square the beauty of religion with this idea that it's just a political control mechanism?
That is a vital pushback.
Mm.
And the text explicitly cautions against that overly cynical view. We were just reporting what's in the text here, but it says it wasn't a conscious, mustache-twirling conspiracy.
Okay, so not a villain in a lair.
No, it was an organic evolution. It was human beings doing exactly what human beings do, which is using the social frameworks they already understand to make sense of the vast unknown. They knew kings, so they imagined a super king.
Okay, that tracks.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, regardless of the original innocent intent of the mystics who started these traditions, the institutionalization of the divine naturally led to a system that requires strict enforcement.
Because an institution wants to survive.
Exactly. An institution, by its very nature, seeks to preserve and expand itself. It's like a biological organism in that way.
Right. And if the institution's survival relies on the concept of a cosmic king who demands total obedience, you have to figure out a way to enforce that obedience across massive populations.
You can't put a sword to everyone's neck 24/7.
No, you can't. Which leads us to the psychological mechanism the text calls the prison without walls. Let's dive into the mechanics of this because it is arguably the most efficient form of behavioral control ever invented.
Let's consider the logistics of a physical prison for a second.
Yeah.
It is incredibly resource intensive.
Oh, yeah. The stone, the iron.
Right. You need to mine stone for the walls, forge iron for the bars, pay salaries to armed guards, build watchtowers, manage food supplies. It's a huge operation.
Very expensive.
But what if you don't need any of that? What if you can successfully convince a human being from a very young age that an invisible, all-powerful authority is constantly watching every single action they take?
And not just actions, right?
Exactly. Not just their actions, but their very thoughts, their deepest unexpressed desires. If you can do that, you completely eliminate the need for physical walls.
Because the person just becomes their own warden.
They do. The mind actively polices itself.
If you teach someone that simply doubting the authority of the institution is a sin, and that this sin is punishable not just by a few years in a concrete cell, but by eternal, agonizing, inescapable suffering, well, the prison is entirely internal.
It's brilliant in a very dark way.
It really is. It became a central theme for Joe Bandra to study the engineering of human belief, to dissect how an idea goes from being a flexible human construct to something so terrifyingly sacred that people are literally afraid to even think critically about it in the privacy of their own minds.
The psychological architecture of this is both brilliant and deeply tragic. Let's look at the mechanics of making doubt a sin.
Okay.
By doing that, the institution disables the exact cognitive tool required for intellectual liberation. You disarm the prisoner before they even know they're in a cell.
Wow. Because questioning is the only way out.
Exactly. Questioning is the only possible way out of a conceptual trap. So the institution just makes the act of questioning the ultimate existential crime.
Mm-hmm.
It's a self-sealing system.
It feels so incredibly modern to me. You know, when I read this part about creating the internal prison, I instantly thought, this is the ultimate subscription model.
A subscription model. I like that analogy.
Yeah, think about how a brilliant, predatory, modern business works. You manufacture a deficit. You create a disease, in this case, telling people from birth that they are fundamentally broken, inherently sinful, and infinitely separated from the divine.
Right. You establish that they are flawed.
You create the disease, and then miraculously, you hold an absolute ironclad monopoly on the only recognized medicine. You create a vast, impassable distance between humanity and the infinite, and then you set up a heavily guarded toll booth on the only bridge across.
Create the fear, then sell the protection.
Yes.
It is an incredibly lucrative and powerful social dynamic. Tell people they are fundamentally unworthy, then generously offer them the specific rituals, the tithes, and the obedience required to earn that worthiness back.
It's genius.
But here is where the text makes a really crucial pivot. The foundation of this entire enterprise, this whole subscription model, relies entirely on a very specific, limited definition of God.
Right.
And this is where the author transitions from historical sociology to pure, undeniable logic, exposing a fatal contradiction in the institutional model.
Yes. Because if you actually stop and define the word infinite, the whole toll booth model just collapses in on itself.
It really does.
The text systematically dismantles the logic of an owned God. Think about it. If God is truly infinite, no human institution can possibly own it. A perfect, complete entity cannot possibly need human validation or verbal compliments or blood sacrifices or 10% of your gross income.
That would imply it lacks something.
Exactly. An omnipresent, limitless God cannot be confined to one specific building with stained glass and cannot possibly favor one specific tribe of upright walking primates over another.
Let's really break down the spatial logic of the infinite here, because this is where our human intellect, which loves borders, really hits a wall.
It's hard to wrap our heads around.
Very hard. Because if you say that God is over there in heaven and you are over here on earth, you have just drawn a boundary line.
Okay.
But if there is a boundary, and if there is anything existing outside of God, then God is, by strict mathematical and philosophical definition, not infinite.
Because something else exists outside of it?
Exactly. The infinite cannot have an outside. The very moment you say, God and me, you have made God finite. You have turned the infinite into just another object in the room, albeit a very large one.
That spatial logic is so trippy, but so undeniably clear once you hear it.
It changes everything.
It's exactly like trying to hoard the ocean. Imagine I walk down to the beach, I scoop up a plastic bucket of ocean water, drive it 500 miles inland, put it on a velvet pedestal in a sanctuary, and declare to the world, hey, we are the only ones with the ocean.
Come see our ocean.
Right. If you want to experience the ocean, you have to come to my specific building, follow my specific dress code, and pay my entry fee.
It's totally absurd.
It is almost comedic when you apply it to water. Yet, that is exactly what we have done with the ground of all being. We scooped it into a bucket and put a copyright symbol on it.
And I would urge you, the listener, to pause and consider the sheer, staggering scale of the physical universe we now know we live in. We are talking about 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe alone.
It's unfathomable.
Each of those galaxies contains billions of stars, massive black holes, swirling nebulas, vast expanses of dark matter.
Just endless.
To assume that the source of all this unimaginable, violent, beautiful complexity requires our daily applause, or gets insecure and angry if one specific species on a tiny pale blue dot in a quiet neighborhood of the Milky Way forgets to sing it a song. I mean, it is the absolute height of human-centric arrogance.
It really is. It's just projecting our own fragile human egos, our own deep insecurities onto the cosmos.
We make the universe in our image.
We do. But here's the thing. We can sit here and talk about the infinite as a math equation all day. We can agree that God can't be put in a box. But intellectually understanding that doesn't actually change how you feel when you wake up in the morning stressed out about your inbox.
Theory versus practice.
Right. To bridge that gap between theoretical philosophy and actual human reality, the author shares a jarringly ordinary moment. Which brings us to a highly specific morning, April 15th, 2020.
Yes, 4:18 a.m. This is where the text shifts beautifully from a philosophical argument to a direct, lived, personal experience.
It gets really personal here.
And what is profoundly striking about the description of this moment is the complete lack of theatricality. There was no thunderclap, there was no angelic choir parting the clouds, there was no booming cinematic voice handing down a new set of golden commandments.
No Hollywood special effects at all, just a guy in his house.
Exactly. Instead of an addition, something magical, it was an experience of profound subtraction. Let's look at the cognitive mechanism of this.
Okay, what happened?
The psychological center, that incessant voice in the head that constantly labels, narrates, judges, and claims ownership of every experience, the thing we call me, simply vanished.
It just turned off.
In the neuroscientific terms, you might say the brain's default mode network just temporarily went quiet.
No.
The rigid boundary between the internal self and the external universe completely dissolved.
So what was left?
What remained was just pure awareness, presence, and an overwhelming, unconditional sense of absolute love. There was no longer a separate person standing outside of reality observing it. There was only reality aware of itself.
And this leads directly to the core realization of the book. As Bandra points... Wait, actually, you explain this part, because the way the book phrases the wave analogy is so precise.
Gladly. As Bandra points out, a wave furiously searching for the ocean is profoundly comical because the wave is made entirely of the exact water it is desperately looking for.
Wow.
The seeker is made of what it seeks.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because when you first hear that, it sounds like just a nice poetic metaphor you'd read on a tea bag.
Right, some light inspiration.
But it isn't. It is a literal, physical, scientific description of human consciousness arising from the universe. We aren't alien tourists dropped onto this rock from somewhere outside of reality. We grew out of it.
We are a product of it.
The iron pumping through your blood right now, the calcium in your teeth, it was literally forged in the explosive hearts of collapsing stars billions of years ago. We are what the universe is doing in this particular spot. We are the universe waking up and looking around.
And once you truly experience that realization that the seeker and the sought are made of the exact same substance, you look back at human history with a completely new, clarified lens.
It changes how you read everything.
It does. You look at the ancient texts, the writings of the great mystics across all traditions, and you suddenly realize they were actually trying to tell us this exact same thing all along. The message was always there, buried under the bureaucracy.
Right. The text points out these specific historical phrases, like Tatvamasi from the Hindu Upanishads, which translates roughly to, thou art that, you are the reality you are looking for.
Yes.
Or in the Christian scripture, Jesus saying, the kingdom of God is within you, and I and the Father are one. The author argues that these ancient figures weren't claiming exclusive magical status. They were pointing directly at this shared, indivisible reality.
But humanity got confused.
Exactly. In our desperate, fear-driven need for maps and boundaries, we completely confuse the pointer for the destination.
It's the classic Zen analogy, worshiping the finger pointing at the moon instead of looking at the actual moon. We became entirely obsessed with the finger.
We really did.
We obsess over the words, the specific doctrines, the grammatical translations, the historical accuracy of the mystic's life. We built elaborate, gold-plated temples to honor the finger, completely forgetting to look up at the sky.
Which raises such a frustrating question. If language is so inherently inadequate for describing this reality, why do we fight so viciously over the spelling and translation of the word water while entirely forgetting to drink?
That's the tragic irony.
The text points this out beautifully. The word water cannot make you wet. The word fire cannot burn you. And the word God is not God. Words are just symbols. They are just maps.
Why do we fight over it? Because the human ego attaches itself to the map. Let's unpack the psychology of a semantic debate for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Defending the map becomes a matter of literal survival for the psychological self. When your entire identity, your community, your sense of safety in the afterlife is built on possessing the correct map, anyone holding a different map isn't just offering an alternative route.
They're a threat.
They represent a mortal existential threat to your reality. This is why semantic debates, whether it's the Council of Nicaea centuries ago or a toxic Reddit thread today, become so incredibly violent. We are defending a label with our lives while entirely missing the profound, shared human experience beneath it.
I want you listening right now to think about the last time you got into a really heated argument online or even across the Thanksgiving table defending a label. Political, religious, whatever.
We've all been there.
During that argument, did you feel connected to the underlying humanity of the person you were arguing with? Or were you just violently smashing your map against their map?
Just smashing maps.
Because if the word God isn't an old man on a throne judging your map, but is instead the totality of reality itself, then we have to re-examine what is probably the most controversial, easily misunderstood statement in the entire source text.
The statement is simply, I am God.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Now, we need to pause here, because the text immediately and explicitly clarifies that this is not an ego trip. In fact, it is the exact opposite of an ego trip.
It's not about the individual self.
Exactly. The temporary personality, the physical body you inhabit, your childhood memories, your strong opinions about tax policy, your biography that is absolutely not the ruler of the universe. The ego is just the temporary wave.
Right. Let's be totally clear. Joe Bandra, the human being who wrote the book, is not God. The host of this show is not God. The wave is temporary, it rises up, it crashes on the shore, and it disappears forever.
But the water.
But the water the wave is made of is eternal.
Precisely. We need to dismantle the concept of separation entirely. We are not foreign, isolated objects dropped into the universe to observe it from a distance. We are an active expression of it. We are not in nature like a person is in a room. We are nature.
We are in nature.
Before any label gets slapped onto you by society, before you are American or conservative or wealthy or Buddhist or an engineer, there is just this simple, undeniable, raw fact of existence, the pure I am. That is the shared ground.
Let me stop you there, because the phrase "we are nature" can sound a bit abstract. It makes me think of an analogy I heard once from Alan Watts about an apple tree.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, an apple tree naturally grows apples. It's what it does at apples. You wouldn't look at an apple and say it's an alien invader on the tree. Yeah. In the exact same way, the universe naturally grows sentient beings. The universe peoples.
Peoples, yes.
We are not separate from the cosmos. We are an expression of the cosmos looking back at itself, trying to understand itself.
It is a beautiful, biologically grounded way to understand our place in the grand scheme. But the text makes a very sharp pivot here to offer a severe warning.
Uh-oh.
Because if we recognize this inherent connection to reality, and if we bravely reject the religious gatekeepers who falsely claim to own the infinite, we face a brand new, equally dangerous trap.
What's the trap?
The danger of simply handing our obedience over to a new set of masters.
Ah, the secular priesthood. This part of the book hit me incredibly hard. The author warns that human beings have a terrible, deeply ingrained habit of rejecting one priesthood only to build another one immediately to replace it.
We just swap them out.
We might bravely outgrow worshiping religious authority, but then we just pivot and start blindly worshiping political ideology or the accumulation of wealth or celebrity culture or academic credentials.
The costumes change, but the behavior doesn't.
The uniforms go from robes to lab coats or business suits, but the psychological pattern of blind obedience, of desperately wanting someone else to just hand us the map so we don't have to think, it remains exactly the same.
Because the burden of critical thinking is extraordinarily heavy. It requires energy, time, and immense cognitive courage to live in uncertainty. It is so much easier, neurologically speaking, to hand your autonomy over to an expert.
It's exhausting to question everything.
Now, the text stresses that science, medicine, and formal education are absolutely vital to human flourishing. We aren't advocating for anti-intellectualism here.
Of course not.
But they must remain open to evidence, to constant correction, and most importantly, to humility. Science is not a set of dogmatic conclusions you memorize. It is a process. It is observation, experimentation, and constant, ruthless revision.
But I have to push back on this for the sake of the listener, because we live in a very weird, very dangerous time. We live in an era of intense, weaponized misinformation.
That is very true.
People will read one heavily biased article on Facebook and suddenly think they know more about virology than an epidemiologist who has studied it for 40 years. How do we balance this mandate of never surrendering our ability to question with the very real need to respect genuine knowledge and expertise?
It's a fine line.
If we aren't careful, doesn't telling everyone to drop the map and question authority just lead to endless paranoid skepticism where nobody believes anything and society just falls apart?
This raises an important question, and it's arguably the defining tightrope walk of the modern information age. How do we remain skeptical without becoming cynical?
Right.
The distinction lies in understanding what true questioning actually is. True questioning is not blind, reactionary rebellion.
Yeah.
It is not rejecting expertise just because it comes from a recognized institution.
It's not just being a contrarian.
No. True questioning means demanding transparency. It means asking for the evidence, putting in the hard work to understand the methodology, and ensuring that the institution itself allows for a process of continuous revision.
Okay, that makes sense.
The danger begins when any institution, whether it's a centuries-old church, a modern political party, or a scientific board, looks at you and says, "You are not allowed to question us. The debate is over." Genuine science invites the question. Fragile dogma punishes it.
So true questioning isn't just being an edgelord on the internet for the sake of it. It's a rigorous, active process. And according to the text, part of that rigorous process involves turning the lens inward.
Looking at yourself.
Yeah. It's easy to question a politician. It's much harder to look deeply at the very thoughts and choices bubbling up in your own head that you assume are entirely your own. Which brings us to the concept of the web of conditions and the really thorny topic of free will.
The source text takes a very grounded, almost deterministic view of human behavior here, but uses it to point toward a higher, much more profound freedom.
Awesome.
It asks us to recognize that every single thought, emotion, and decision you make arises from a staggeringly complex, interconnected network of prior conditions.
Stuff we don't even control.
Think about the sheer volume of variables. Your baseline biology, your childhood trauma, your genetic predispositions, the specific culture and era you were raised in, your current blood sugar levels, how much sleep you got last night.
Yeah.
The very next thought that pops into your mind will emerge from a vast web of conditions that you did not consciously construct.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Let's bring this down to earth. Think about driving to work tomorrow morning. Someone cuts you off in traffic.
A classic scenario.
The intense spike of anger that hits your chest isn't a free choice. It's a chemical reaction based on your stress levels, your evolutionary biology designed to protect your territory, and maybe a learned behavior from watching your parents drive.
You didn't invent that anger.
If I don't control the conditions that produce that anger, am I just a biological robot reacting to stimuli? Because that sounds pretty bleak.
It only sounds bleak if you fiercely cling to the illusion of absolute magical control over your life. But the text argues that deeply understanding this conditioning actually creates a much deeper, more authentic form of freedom.
Okay, I'm listening.
Let's look at how morality functions in this framework. Nature operates entirely on causes and conditions without malice. A hurricane doesn't hate the coastal town it destroys. A virus isn't plotting evil in a laboratory, it is just blindly replicating.
Right, it's just nature doing its thing.
But humans are different because we experience subjective suffering and flourishing. Therefore, morality isn't about blind obedience to ancient, arbitrary laws designed to appease a cosmic king. Morality becomes a highly practical, observable question.
Which is?
Does this specific belief or action increase our collective capacity to connect, create, and flourish? Or does it make us more fearful, hateful, and divided?
That is such a powerful, pragmatic shift. It takes morality out of the realm of abstract theoretical theology and puts it right down on the messy ground of daily life.
It makes it tangible.
Does this belief cause unnecessary suffering to myself or others? If yes, it's a bad map. Period. And going back to the traffic jam example and the idea of freedom, true freedom isn't about having total control over the universe so nobody ever cuts you off.
Because you can't control that.
True freedom is metacognition. It's the ability to observe your own programming in real time. It's feeling that spike of road rage and saying, oh, I see what's happening. My heart rate is up. This is a conditioned response. Because I can see the conditioning, I am no longer a slave to it.
You pause the reaction.
Exactly. I don't have to roll down my window and scream, I can take a breath and choose differently.
Exactly. Understanding the mechanical, conditioned nature of your own mind is the only actual way to not be a slave to it. You step out of the machinery by observing it.
It's empowering.
And if we truly internalize this entire philosophy, that we are all expressions of the exact same underlying reality, heavily bound by shared biological conditions, all struggling desperately with the same inherited maps, it radically changes how we interact with the world right now. It destroys the foundation of hatred.
Which brings us to the practical application of this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
Dropping the map. The author poses this incredibly beautiful vision of the future. What happens to the concept of a holy war when humanity finally realizes that absolutely no one owns the infinite?
You can't go to war over borders that don't exist.
What happens to the deeply arrogant idea of a chosen people? Now, the text doesn't say religious institutions need to be burned to the ground or eradicated. It suggests they can organically evolve.
They don't have to disappear.
They can transform from rigid systems of control into open communities of fellow travelers.
The problem was never the desire for community. The problem wasn't the ritual of gathering together or the singing or the creation of beautiful stained glass art.
Those are beautiful things.
The problem is, and always has been, the claim of exclusive truth. When an institution says, we, and we alone, are the only valid bridge to reality and everyone else is doomed, that is the seed of holy war. It is an act of spiritual violence.
It divides us entirely.
But imagine a community that says, we are all exploring this incredible mystery together. Here are some ancient maps we find useful. Here's some poetry we love. But we recognize they're just maps. We are open to revision. That is a flourishing, life-giving community.
The author leaves the reader with a final physical challenge to break the spell of the map, and I want to pass that challenge directly to you, the listener. Tonight, when it gets dark, I want you to go outside and look up at the stars.
Just look at them.
And for just 1 minute, refuse to name them. Don't turn them into a theological lesson about God's majesty, and equally, don't turn them into a sterile astrophysics lesson about nuclear fusion and distance. Drop all the maps. Drop the labels.
Experience the territory.
Just look. Feel the cool air on your skin. Feel your breath going in and out. Notice the inevitable thoughts bubbling up in your head, trying to categorize the experience, and just ask yourself quietly, who is aware of those thoughts?
It is an invitation to experience the terrifying but ultimately liberating silence of simply being. Before language intervenes, before thought rushes in to tell you who you are and what everything means, what is actually there?
Just presence.
Reality does not need your belief in order to exist. The stars don't care if you know their names. The infinite is not threatened by your questions. The truth, if it is actually the truth, and not just a fragile map, never needs to be protected by fear.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We've moved from the geographical maps we inherited as children through the psychological history of projecting earthly kings onto the cosmos. We dismantled the brilliant but tragic internal prison of blind obedience.
It's been quite a journey.
And we arrived at this incredible, scientifically and spiritually profound realization: we are the wave made of the ocean. We are temporary, beautiful, complex expressions of a shared, indivisible reality.
It is a journey from inherited dogma to direct experience, from spending your entire life reading a menu to finally taking a bite of the food, from arguing about the chemical composition of water to finally taking a drink.
But I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought that builds on everything we've discussed today. Something not explicitly laid out in the text, but deeply implied by it.
I'm intrigued.
The author strongly advises us to drop the map so we can finally see the territory. But consider this. If we truly are the universe experiencing itself, then human beings drawing maps, writing scriptures, creating religions, and telling these elaborate stories, well, all of that is also just the universe doing what it does.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Our instinct to build these massive belief structures wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch in the cosmic software. It was a necessary evolutionary stage of a young, newly conscious universe desperately trying to understand itself.
We had to go through it.
So perhaps in the end, true awakening isn't about hating the map. It isn't about regretting the borders we drew or feeling foolish for believing in them. True awakening is simply realizing that we have finally outgrown them.
A profound way to look at it. The maps serve their evolutionary purpose, carrying us through the dark, getting us to the exact point where we could finally realize we no longer need them.
Keep questioning the borders you see. Keep investigating the labels you use to define yourself and others. And above all, never, ever be afraid of the truth. We'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might benefit from the conversation. Your support helps us continue exploring the deepest questions of life, consciousness, and reality. I am Julia Carter, and it is my honor to introduce Joe Bandra, author, philosopher, speaker, healthcare technology pioneer, and lifelong explorer of life's questions. Through his writing, Joe bridges science, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, and direct experience in a search for truth. His first book, Finding Nevaeh, is a transformative journey of self-discovery and the search for lasting happiness. His second book, Body, Mind, and Machine, chronicles his remarkable career and the evolution of healthcare technology. His next book, The Nature of Reality, explores consciousness, existence, and the mysteries at the heart of human experience. Joe's work invites us to look beyond what we think we know and awaken to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
Life often feels like an endless list of tasks, constant noise and distractions, pulling us in every direction. We're all searching for happiness, but what if we've been looking in the wrong places all along?
This was Nevaeh's journey. Lost in the noise, she felt cut off from the peace and happiness she longed for, until she met Joe Bandra, an unconventional, insightful philosopher with a different perspective. Jay, as he is simply known, didn't hand her a map. He gave her something far more valuable, a compass, a way to turn inward, navigate her own thoughts, and uncover the clarity hidden beneath the chaos.
Readers around the world have been touched and inspired by Finding Nevaeh.
Your journey to inner peace begins now. Get your copy of Finding Nevaeh, available on Amazon and at findingnevaeh.org. or listen to the audiobook on Audible, Spotify, Apple, and other platforms.